From Vassar College, this is Conversations at the Salt Line with Wesley Dixon.
On this episode, a conversation with Jim Kim.
Hey everyone, it's me, Wes, and welcome to this episode of Conversations at the Salt Line. In this episode, you will hear a recording of a live conversation between me and Dr. Jim Kim. Dr. Kim is the current chancellor of the University of Global Health Equity and the former president of Dartmouth College and the World Bank. Dr. Kim joined us here on campus recently to help us launch the Vassar Institute for the Liberal Arts, and in our conversation, we explore his life in the liberal arts. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to Vassar, Jim.
Thanks, Wes. Great to be here. By the way, I just want to say Betsy's a hero of mine. She's been a leader in global health for a long time. And the reason she knows that I sing karaoke is because we sang together in Butaro, Rwanda. We sang Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World, and some students caught it on video. So if you want...
What's more dangerous, Jim, is that I also have it on video. We don't know those students, but
right,
I have it.
Wes was there too.
But it's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Our conversation is called A Life in the Liberal Arts. Of course, we're at Vassar. You've had a liberal arts education yourself, but you've lived one, I would argue, throughout your career. I want to just, for the purpose of this conversation, give a framing for us, but also for the audience that might guide our conversation. Here at Vassar, we think about liberal arts as having three distinct components. One is the content of your education. It's broad, it's expansive, multidisciplinary, and really leans on primary sources. That's number one. Number two is the pedagogy, the way that we learn. The classroom is inclusive. We have an inquiry-based way of learning. There are experiential components to the education outside of the classroom. That's number two. And number three is the culture. The culture in which people learn is one that is inclusive, engaging, empowering of those who are maybe low-level actors, if you will, students in the school's case, but others in other cases, that really lets them be the agent of their educational experience. So I think those in the room who went to Vassar would probably agree those three things have defined large parts of the education at Vassar. But we're here to talk about your life. And so I want us to go through those three domains in your life and see where they have re-popped up, if you will, as an adult and as a professional, and see how you're able to navigate living your life as a liberal arts advocate and champion. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Let's start with the content. As Betsy just said, you have had many incredible roles at an incredibly wide range of diverse organizations. So in your life, you've been a serial entrepreneur, but not sort of in the same industry, so to speak, right? So how have you navigated that? What have been the highs, the lows? What have been the insightful moments of synergy that have come from your liberal arts education that's empowered you to do that in your career?
Well, thanks, Wes. Those are all wonderful points. But for me, my attraction to the liberal arts came really from my parents. So my father who passed away when he was rather young, was a dentist. A member of probably the most practical profession you could imagine. My mother did her PhD in philosophy and studied Chinese Neo-Confucianism along with, and she'd also done a master's degree at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. So I had both of these influences, and I actually went to Brown University and I did human biology, and I transferred there from the University of Iowa. And so when I came home from my first semester at Brown, my father, the dentist, picked me up at the airport, and we were driving home from the airport about 30 miles away from my hometown. And he asked me, so Jim, what do you want to study? And so I said, Dad, I want to study philosophy and political science. I'm going to become part of a political movement. He literally pulled the car over to the side of the road, and he looked back at me, and probably in Korean, I didn't speak Korean at the time, in Korean swore to me a little bit, but he said, look, Jim, after you finish your residency, you can study anything you want. Right? And so this turned out to be great advice, because it gave me a skill. And he would say things to me. So, we came to the United States in 1964 for the first time, but he and my mother had met in the 1950s in New York City. They were a part of a very small group of Korean students who were living here. And he said to me, look, I don't think anyone's going to pay to listen to your ideas about philosophy and political science. Now, he may have been wrong, but he was right about this idea of getting a skill, getting something that no one can take away from you. I mean, it's a theme that many sort of, that you hear in many different groups of people, but that's what he said to me. And I'm so glad I did it, because if I were just talking about political ideas, there's nothing wrong with that. I admire people who do that. But we took on our various causes by looking at something specific. Is it true that it's impossible to treat HIV in Africa? And if that is true, what's that going to mean for the 25 million people who are living with HIV there? Putting my World Bank hat on, if we had really bought into that, that sort of quote unquote scientific idea, the economy of sub-Saharan Africa would have collapsed, right? And so for us, we had enough content, we'd learned enough of the specifics to be able to go out and say, look, what you're saying that it's impossible, you don't know that because nobody's ever tried. We've tried it at a small scale in Haiti, and then we went right to the moral argument. We said, on content, you're wrong. We think it is possible. But from a moral perspective, if we let 25 million people living in Africa with HIV, if we let 25 million people die, we will forever be remembered as a generation that turned our backs on 25 million people, which led to, I didn't know at the time, because I was not in the World Bank, I was not living with economists my whole life. I didn't know that the African economies would collapse, but as a good liberal arts person, I'd taken some courses and I thought, I'm going to claim that this will happen. Nobody knew for sure, right? But one can imagine 25 million people not knowing their status, dying. The only industry that was growing in Africa at the time was coffin making, right? The economies were already slowing down. And you can't believe how angry, Betsy was right there. It wasn't that people were saying, you guys, it's really great that you're talking about maybe treating people with HIV, but I just don't think it's possible. That's not what they were saying. They were saying, who the hell do you think you are, coming and telling us that something is possible when we know it's not possible? What are you accusing us of? That was really the issue. They were saying to us, are you accusing us of neglecting something that we can do? We know it can't be done. Now, if you talk to people in HIV today, they'll all tell you that they were treatment activists. But it's not true. Frankly, the only person among that upper echelon of people who were supporting us, the only person was Tony Fauci. And Tony Fauci, as a moral human being, said, I don't know how to do it. I couldn't treat somebody for HIV in Haiti the way you guys do. But if you tell me it's possible, then I support you, right? And he actually took my partner, Paul Farmer, late one night into the White House to meet with George Bush's people, showed them our before and after pictures, and we changed the argument. But it was the fact that we actually understood the content, that we'd done the hard work of understanding what the medical issues were, that allowed us to make the moral argument more broadly.
Absolutely.
You got to know your stuff, and I think a liberal arts education is where you get that.
Absolutely. It's really easy for us and for everyone in the audience to sort of paint a really good picture of how liberal arts empowers us to do what you just did. It's sort of what we sell ourselves on, right? But the truth is, at least I like to think, the world outside of Vassar has a lot of pressure that works against sort of living a life like that or getting an education like that. And so for you in your career and in your life, I'm curious to hear how you have fought back against the pressure to sort of think more simply, less complex, integrate fewer things, and be able to have a dynamic life with different kinds of roles and different kinds of spaces.
Well, so in that particular discussion, the people who are so much against us were the ones who were saying, who were using cost effectiveness arguments, right? And so that's data too. That's good data. It's important data. And we just kept saying, yeah, but cost effectiveness data assumes a stable sort of baseline in terms of we're only ever going to get the money we have now, right? But if we had, say, instead of a few $100 million, $10 billion, then wouldn't you want to do this? Because an entire continent is at risk here. And they said what they said to us, there's no way we're going to get $10 billion, right? And then George Bush declared that he was going to treat people in Africa, and then all the floodgates opened. And throughout Africa, President Bush is still revered, right? In fact, in many ways more than President Obama, as the person who saved that continent, right? And so changing one person's mind, not giving in to the very rational pressure coming at us from scholars saying it's not cost effective. We can't do this. And the reason I think that we were able to do it is because we were, my colleague Paul Farmer and I, we were so steeped in the moral discourses of anthropology and literature and all the things that we'd been reading that we sort of understood that we were in a critically important historical moment, and that the choices we made there were going to determine how we were looked at as a generation. And the thing, in talking to undergraduates about this, when I tell this story, they sort of say, "Oh my God, can you believe that people were actually saying that we're going to let 25 million people in Africa die of HIV?" And I stop them and I say, "Look, the point of telling you the story is not to castigate the people of 20 years ago. I want you to turn around and say, what are the things that in 20 years, young people are going to look back and say, God, can you believe they allowed that situation to persist? Can you believe they didn't do anything about that?" And I think there's a long list of things that we're in the middle of now. The one I'm working on a lot on is mental health. Mental health is just, it's gotten so bad, especially for Gen Zers. I now am working with the government of Korea to try to tackle their mental health crisis, which is fundamentally threatening to the future of the country, right? So anyway, that's the whole idea, that you've gotta do the work, get the content, study the science, but then you've got to marry that somehow with the sort of the broader moral, historically significant insights that you can then look at a situation and not look at it on the basis of one analytic framework, which at the time was cost effectiveness analysis. Yeah.
Let's move to pedagogy, but I want to incorporate this concept of data that you just left us on in part. In the pedagogy bucket, we talked about experiential learning or experiences that sort of animate our learning. I know that in Partners in Health, the work you all did in Peru had a different kind of data associated with it, so to speak, which is proximity to the problem. You all were really close to something in a way that made it both a primary source, but also gave you an experience that allowed you to solve some problems. Can you talk about that experience for us?
So, teaching people sort of quote unquote at the bedside. We talk about this in medicine all the time. It's so critically important. But when we were in Peru, we were trying to treat drug-resistant tuberculosis in a very poor squatter settlement. And the key to being successful was to have community health workers who would visit the patients every day. And so we were students. The impetus behind Partners in Health was a tremendous and deep appreciation for liberation theology, not in a religious sense, but from a very practical sense, right? And liberation theology, the idea was pretty simple, straightforward. It was, the motto was to make a preferential option for the poor. Love everybody, but have your preference tilted toward the poor. And they also had they had a pedagogy, right? And it came from a great Brazilian sociologist named Paulo Freire, and the book is called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? And the liberation theologians developed a way of talking to very poor people about their life situation, and it was called See, Judge, Act. They sat with these very poor communities and say, so what's happening around you? What's going on? What's going on in your lives? And often these communities, they're so downtrodden, had picked up the sort of mainstream discourse. Well, it's because we're not educated. It's because of this and that and the other. And they would just keep prodding and say, well, is that really why? What's really happening? Is that just? Do you think that's a just? So you see something, you judge it, and then you decide, what am I going to do about it? Right? So we actually had tools for pedagogy of students at all levels. We weren't great at it at first, right? But we kept at it, and we developed this core of community health workers that were absolutely the key in getting successful treatment outcomes, which, prior to doing HIV work, made the point that again, another disease, drug-resistant tuberculosis, that everyone said was untreatable, we showed that in fact it was treatable. And in fact, our outcomes were better than most medical centers in the United States. And I think it's because we focus so much on the TLC part, having people visit the patients every day and make sure that they were taking their medicines. So the pedagogy was real for them, right? But the other thing that we always talked about was one of the things that we saw among the people who were so angry at us for suggesting that you could treat these things was that they had become kind of immune to sort of really absorbing the suffering of the poor, right? So we used to say, you've got to have a proximity to that suffering. And then you've got to ask yourself whether your soul is still capable of being fractured by the suffering of the poor. Because what happened is people lose that. They kind of become inured of it. And the great Bill Foege, who was the guy who came up with the strategy to rid the world of smallpox, Bill used to say, I always ask myself, am I capable of not averting my gaze from the suffering of the poor? And so the pedagogy came, at the level of sort of being there with the patients, and there was nothing like it. And I still try to put myself in those situations, because you can sort of carve it out and say, yeah, but you got to be realistic, and you got to look at the cost effectiveness analysis, and some things you just can't do. Not doing that, preventing yourself from doing that, was the key to the growth of Partners in Health.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to go back to the C-Judge Act sort of trifecta. It sounds really exciting and sounds really good. Where I'm curious about it is the C part. Because you can be with someone, you can be next to someone, but you don't always have the ability to see them or to see them fully. And I'm curious what you and others have done to really make sure that as you're working in, whether it's TB or in education or other kinds of settings, that you've trained yourself to see someone, the person, the issue fully, and not how you want to see it.
So, it's really, what's really interesting is that the methodological training I got in medicine was in some ways very similar to the methodological training I got in anthropology, right? So what you're taught in Introduction to Clinical Medicine is how to interview people, right? And you're taught all these wonderful things that after your Introduction to Clinical Medicine, generally you never use again, right? Like ask them open-ended questions and really give them the sense that you're there to listen. Right? So, we'd actually time people. How long can you wait before you jump in and say something? Right? And we worked on that early on in our medical careers.
How am I doing?
You're doing great. You're a pro, Wes. That's why I'm squirming up here, because you're a pro. And then in anthropology, of course, ethnographic interviewing is exactly that. You sit down and say, well, what are you doing? How does that make you feel? That must have been difficult for you. And you're dying to get this information. So what happens is that the careers of anthropologists and doctors diverge in a very important way. People tell doctors all kinds of things that doctors don't want to know. Well, it all goes back to my daughter-in-law. And this has been going on. This has been going on for 30 years. And doc, can I tell you? And doctors don't want to hear it, right? Anthropologists are dying to hear it, but nobody wants to tell anthropologists, because they'll just go off and tell everybody else about it, right? So those are the two things that, and ethnographic interviewing is just an incredible skill, right? Just, one of my professors, Sally Falkmore, who was one of the great political anthropologists in the history of the field, said it's really quite simple. You just walk into a room and you say, who the hell are these people and what do they want? And you keep asking yourself that question over and over and over again, and you start getting somewhere with your ethnography, but being really serious about wanting to know that, right? That's pretty rare. And that's why anthropology as a disciplinary training was so wonderful for me. It forced me, because I'd have to write it up then. I have to say, this person said this, and this is what that meant, right? And so I think if everyone can get that. And in terms of mental health, we're trying to build in that kind of, I'm working with a group of people, we're trying to bring something called psychological first aid to college campuses, to businesses, because it specifically teaches people how to look and see whether someone might be in trouble, depression, anxiety, even thoughts of hurting oneself. And then it gives you steps of how you ask questions, right? So you've got to practice that. It's not something that you just know naturally. And the more you practice, the better you get at it. And if you had a whole campus of people looking at each other and saying, could this person be in trouble? I think that would change the feel of a campus. And it's so wonderful that people actually look at each other to see if something's going on, as opposed to looking at their smartphones. Yeah.
Let's move for a moment to culture. Obviously, you know a lot about culture. You talked about ethnographies as a way of culture finding, if you will. But obviously, in a liberal arts culture, we like to have a culture that empowers people to be able to create a life for themselves, if you will, and is inclusive and sort of has the tenets of what we call engaged pluralism here at Vassar. In your career, what have been the sort of exciting moments of culture shaping or molding or adjusting that have been demonstrative of a liberal arts training and a life?
Well, you know, the times when we won our battles, right? So when we won the first battle and the World Health Organization, instead of saying anyone with drug-resistant tuberculosis in a poor country is going to die, right? I mean, they literally had declared a death sentence on everybody. I remember the moment when the culture changed. And the moment was, you know, I was pushing to have the World Health Organization change its official position on this. And there was this intense argument for 2 days, and then they finally decided that they were going to do it, right? So that was a shift in culture that was, that I specifically had worked on. And it was painful for a lot of the people who were still against it. But also, I've seen young people, especially, make their own culture. The community health workers. A lot of them, they started off not being so sensitive to others. There was one young man who regularly got slapped by his patients, right? And so we were able to, even in that setting, the community health workers also came from very poor families, but getting them to shift, and this was the tremendous patience of the young corps of nurses who trained all these people, moving an entire group of people toward greater compassion, toward greater humility, that actually worked. Now, at universities, it's hard, right? So I remember Steve Mandel, who was he was my board chair at Dartmouth. Remember, Steve, when we tried to start a leadership program at Dartmouth? So I was excited. There was a bunch of very brilliant, wonderful people. We had, Jeff Immelt, who was CEO of General Electric, saying, we'd like to support a leadership effort. And so I went to the faculty and said, we're going to do leadership. And they said, wait a minute, we hate leadership. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, leadership connotes followership. And we teach all our students to think for themselves, right? And I thought, there's a point there. I understand what you're talking about, right? And one time when we did strategic planning, and I was at a faculty meeting, I don't even know if you know this, Steve, but one gentleman stood up and said, what are you talking about, strategic plan? I'm a strategic plan. I am my strategic plan, and every faculty member in here is their own strategic plan, right? And so I came to very deeply respect that kind of spirit in these great institutions, right? There was no, we weren't going to do any sort of culture building, trust fall kind of. They didn't want any of that. They wanted the clarity and the independence for every student, every faculty member to sort of plot their own way. And to me, I've come to think that that's the beauty. That's the real beauty and strength of a liberal arts education.
Yeah. You've worked in a variety of different country settings. Obviously, those countries have different cultures, sure, right? And so I'm curious how you have navigated learning those cultures, adapting to those cultures, resisting the urge to project other cultures onto another. I don't only mean sort of cultural society, I mean in an organization or any other sort of body we're thinking about.
So in anthropology, they tell you the most important period of time for you in your writing is the first 3 months, right? Just make sure every night you sit down and write furiously everything you see and everything you felt in those first 3 months. Because after the first 3 months, things start seeming normal, right? And most anthropological texts are from the very early time when you see cultural difference so clearly, right? So what I've learned over time, I learned 2 languages after the age of 24, which is really hard. I relearned Korean, and then I learned Spanish. And then, because I was in Geneva, I learned a bit of French, but those are the 2 languages I really learned. And in the process of learning those languages, the overwhelming sense I got is, gosh, people are pretty similar just about everywhere you go, right? And for the World Bank, of course, I went, it must have been 100 countries, seeing all kinds of different places, and I was much less struck by cultural difference than by sort of the consistency of human experience in terms of who people are and what they want, right? So I've had this amazing privilege of being to all these different places and coming back saying, wow, human beings are pretty similar everywhere.
I'm going to give you a little pop quiz.
Sure.
I think you'll do well on it. I hope you do well on it for everyone in the room's sake. So you haven't been ambassador for 3 months. You've been here for 3 hours, right? And this institute has only been up for maybe 3 months. And I'm curious if you would take a stab at diagnosing what the culture of this institute as part of a larger cell that is Vassar is. And if you can diagnose that, I want you to tell me sort of what the data is that's informing that diagnosis.
So, piece of data number 1. Yeah. So I remember I asked Betsy this question in Rwanda. Where are the other liberal arts institutions in the United States or in the world? And there aren't any, right? And so the fact that you would do this, that you would build an institute defending, celebrating, preserving liberal arts, as a fundamental idea, I think it's awesome, right? It's just, congratulations to all of you. I think it's because it's changing a lot, and I think the liberal arts are under threat. I think there's less of a sense of the importance of what a liberal arts education does in terms of content, pedagogy, and culture, and so I've only been here for 3 hours, so give me a break on that, Wes. But I think that the fact that you've just put a stake in the ground for liberal arts, what a former president of Dartmouth, John Sloan Dickey, called the liberating arts, right? I think they are liberating. I mean, I've had this unbelievable opportunity to walk into a room and argue about treatment regimens for MDR-TB, but then in my mind linking this to the history of Tuskegee, the fact that that the dominant medical culture has been willing to do terrible things that didn't seem terrible when they started doing them, right? And in my mind was, we will look back at this one day and think, God, how could we have declared a death sentence on everybody with drug-resistant TB without even bothering to see if it was possible to do something about it in developing countries? And to be able to have that historical perspective. I mean, I don't think that very many of the people we were arguing against in the TB community really understood, the Tuskegee experiment. I don't think they did. Or I don't, and let me put it this way, I don't think they studied it in the same way that I did, right? In really reading deeply into what that was like for, African Americans to have gone through that, being, injected with syphilis and then watched, as a natural history experiment. And the rage, right, that rightfully arose when it was discovered that it was still going on. Yeah.
Give me one piece of data.
One piece of data.
You just give me one.
I didn't know if anyone would show up to listen to me. But thank you for coming. I mean, wow. It's, the fact that you named it the Liberal Arts Institute, I think it's just fantastic. It's just fantastic. And that I tell you, I think the most difficult problems of the day require being able to think across multiple dimensions, multiple disciplines. I just had this long conversation with the head of a group that's trying to rethink artificial intelligence. and it's an incredibly illustrious group. And they told me that they reached out to me because they want to think about the broader social implications of what they're doing, right? I think there are many, many questions like that. The thing that is just obsessing me these days is, if you haven't read it, there's a book called The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt, NYU professor. Scariest book I've read in a very long time, about how social media has dramatically increased anxiety and depression rates among young people, and about how it's fundamentally changing the way the neuronal connections are made in young people's brains. You've got to read it. And I'm trying to, first thing we did, and it wasn't me, it was my wife, we took our son's smartphone away, and he's got a flip phone now, right? His friends made fun of him. They said, what's next? You're the only one going backwards in technology where you can send smoke signals from your house. But he's kind of proud of it now, right? He's kind of proud of it that he's off social media. But it's really, really scary. And so the fact, I say all that because the fact that you guys here are embracing the liberal arts gives me hope. That's a data point, my hope.
Thank you. I have one more question for you, but I want to flag for the audience that this is our last question, and then I will take audience questions, so feel free to submit them if you haven't already done that. I want to actually talk about hope, so I'm happy you brought us there. There's lots that is very sort of negative and deflating and difficult, and given the roles you've had, you have exposure to the things that are not great in the world. And you just talked about something, mental health, that is not quite yet on the progression that would give us hope. We're sort of in a negative place about that. So I'm just curious how you sort of hold in your head the truth of the realities, the real truth that things are not as rosy as we might want them to be, but also still keep a nugget of hope that things might get better and that we're on the path to get better.
Yeah. So when I was at WHO, we were in the midst of trying to do treatment scaling, and it wasn't looking good. There were not very many people getting on treatment. And one of my staff, she was a very accomplished HIV scientist, expert on prevention. She finally got the guts to come up to me one day and say, Jim, you're running around the world talking about HIV treatment, and I have to tell you, it just makes me crazy. You're just giving people false hope. Right? And I didn't have an answer for her. I was a little shocked, right? But then when Barack Obama had his campaign, right, he said, people accuse me of giving people false hope, but there's no such thing as false hope. There's just hope. And I thought, wow, I wish I knew that. But one of the things that I've said to people, right? To be fair to the public health people who were against the things that we were trying to do, if you go out there, the evidence kind of seems apparent that it's really hard to treat HIV or drug-resistant TB in these settings. And so what I used to tell our young people is, look, about hope and optimism. I said, when you're from a wealthy background, being a doctor in the United States, and you go to a very poor setting, right? Optimism doesn't come from sort of, scientific analysis of what you see. Optimism is a moral choice. And if you work with us, you have to be ready to make that moral choice. Because if I'm, head of the HIV department, I go to Africa and I say, oh, God, you can't do HIV treatment here. My pessimism will become the outcome. Yeah, not just infectious, it will become the outcome. And that's what was going on, right? The experts were coming and they were looking and giving in to their pessimism as opposed to choosing optimism, because 25 million people's lives depended on it. So I keep saying that. I keep telling people, look, when you're up against terrible problems and at the same time you're working on the side of social justice, optimism has to be the moral choice you make.
Thank you. We can give Jim a hand. So
are you going to show
the video? You want me to cast it to the screen? We're talking about your karaoke video. No. No, we have two questions for you so far.
Yeah.
The first one reads, you mentioned earlier that we should not castigate those who advised against aid in Africa 20 years ago. Accountability is something we're talking a lot about these days. Where does accountability fit in today's climate?
Great question. So, there's a video I show it in many of my talks. There's a video of the head of the United States Agency for International Development, a guy at the time named Andrew Natsios, a very smart, very decent guy. And the member of Congress asks him, so is it possible to treat HIV in Africa? And he says, look, straight face, he says, well, you know, in Africa, they have no concept of time, right? They know morning, they know noon, they know dark of night. But if you tell them, you know, you got to take these medicines at 10 in the morning, they'll say, what's 10 in the morning, right? And you know, this is like the worst statement to have been videotaped and now available forever. And then when I show that of him saying that, right, everyone goes, oh my God, how, you know, what? And I immediately say, please don't castigate this gentleman, right? Because he was just going by what every single physician in USAID was telling him. Don't say it's possible. It's not possible. We don't have the money. We don't have the resources. It's not possible to do it. He just added his own flair, right? Because he had been to Africa, and he thought he'd add his own flavor to it and say, you know, I've been to Africa. Well, what happened was after that statement came out, he had just been to Africa, and the hosts the people who had hosted him in Africa said, well, it's very interesting that Mr. Natsios say that. He was the only one late for every meeting. But of course, it was not true. I mean, it was not true that they had no concept of time. And of course, the other thing we know is that once the medicines became available, they saw, like we saw, that people who took antiretroviral medicines, we called it the Lazarus effect of HIV treatment, literally rising from the dead. And because that was just so obvious to people, the adherence rates to HIV therapy have been incredibly high, higher in Africa than in the United States. Yeah.
Wow. The next question we had submitted was, someone said, polio was nearly eradicated. Can depression be nearly eradicated?
Much harder, right? But what I didn't know, I mean, I've just been working on mental health for the last 3 years. Frankly, I felt ashamed that I hadn't worked on it. And one of the things about mental health, you know, in the United States especially, there were more than 700 million visits for mental health issues in the United States last year, right? So you'd think, my God, there's so many visits, everything must be going really well. But Tom Insel, who is now a good friend, who is the head of the National Institute for Mental Health, says that even though there were 700 million visits, outcomes are getting worse, right? And the crazy thing about mental health is that there's no triage system in mental health, right? So if you have a child who is upset and depressed and considering suicide, what do? You go to the emergency room. And if you happen to be there and there's a person who specializes in adolescent psychiatry or psychology and is an expert on helping young people through this episode, then you're very lucky. But otherwise, there's no system that gets you to the form of treatment that's best. So there's so many new treatments. It's not as good as HIV treatment, right? It doesn't have the Lazarus effect, but they're so much better. You know, for PTSD, you know, a combination of cognitive behavioral, dialectical behavioral therapy, and psilocybin, mushrooms, right, has been shown to be much more effective. MDMA, ecstasy, has been shown to be effective. Ketamine, there's so many transcranial magnetic stimulation. There's so many new treatments, and there's not a way where you walk into a door or get online and they immediately get you to the person who's most likely to help you. That doesn't exist yet for mental health. And so you can only imagine what that's like in developing countries. In many African countries, what we do is we find people shackled to their beds. I mean, it's the pre-therapy kind of era. So, you know, and the advocates for mental health are right there because just about all of us are like 1 degree separated from someone who's really suffered, right? So we kind of understand it. There are things to do, but you know, it's still the most stigmatized disease. And there was only one period in history that I know of where something else was stigmatized more than mental health. And that was the 15 years that we didn't have treatment for HIV, right? During that 15 years, HIV was the most stigmatized disease. But when we started treating people, the stigma just completely went away. I'd love to see that happen because the more we get people on effective treatment or, you know, with meditation or cognitive behavioral therapy, there's so many new ways of thinking about it that as more people get better, as people get more comfortable talking about it, there will be kind of a snowballing effect and we'll finally make the kind of progress that I'd love to see on mental health.
Wonderful. Wonderful, thank you. Last question before we end our conversation. Someone has asked, in all of your travels and or in your work at the World Bank, what nation, what country in the world has been batting above its weight, so to speak? Where have there been some special things that we may not know about that we should amplify and know about in terms of unique interventions or societal practices that we might learn from?
Well, it's the one that Betsy and I work in together, Rwanda, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of negative stuff written about the president, but he is the general who stopped the genocide, right? And he then did a lot of MBA work because he said, I'm a general, I don't know how to run things. So he took courses on management, leadership, finance, and it's the most effectively run country I've ever seen. There are no plastic bags anywhere. He outlawed plastic bags. So you don't see any of it on the street. There's something called, gosh, I'm blocking it. Umudunga, I think is what it's called. Every last Saturday of every month, the citizens, every single one has to go out and do some project, whether it's cleaning or planting plants. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. And that's why they call it the proof of concept country, right? And so that's why we built the University of Global Health Equity there, right? And that's why the reach of the liberal arts from Vassar extends all the way to Rwanda. And I can tell you the students love learning from the Vassar faculty. So it's the one country that has just been most remarkable. And we're hoping that that other countries will pick it up. But it's hard. I mean, governance is always hard. New democracies are always, difficult to support. Elections go in all kinds of crazy ways everywhere, including, this country. So you never quite know. But Rwanda gives me great hope.
Jim, thank you, Metakozi, for your life in the liberal arts, and thank you for joining us today.
Wes was with us.
I was there.
Thank you.
Thank you.